Welcome back to In History. The Crusades were one of the most significant series of events in medieval history, with religious fervor, territorial ambition, and brutal conflict shaping much of Europe and the Middle East for centuries. Today, we'll be taking a closer look at the Second Crusade, a campaign launched in response to the fall of Edessa, and one that ultimately ended in failure for the Christian forces. But why did it fail, and how did it change the course of history? Stay tuned as we explore the rise and fall of the Second Crusade. The Second Crusade was sparked by a monumental event, the fall of Edessa in 1144. Edessa was one of the first Crusader states established after the First Crusade, but it lay on the frontier, vulnerable to attacks from Muslim forces. In December of 1144, Zengi, the ambitious Muslim ruler of Mosul and Aleppo, besieged the city. His successful capture of Edessa shocked Christendom, leading to calls for a new crusade to reclaim lost territory and defend the remaining Crusader states. The fall of Edessa sent ripples through Europe. It was the first significant loss for the Crusader states, raising fears that the Muslim forces could wipe out the remaining Christian strongholds in the Holy Land. In 1145, Pope Eugene III issued a papal bull calling for a new crusade to recapture Edessa and strengthen Christian holdings in the Levant. The Pope's call was taken up by none other than Bernard of Clairvaux, one of the most influential religious figures of the time. Bernard toured Europe, preaching the cause of the crusade with fiery sermons that stirred the hearts of nobles and commoners alike. His words inspired some of the most powerful monarchs of the day to take up the cross, including King Louis VII of France and Emperor Conrad III of Germany. For the first time, the crusade was led by two reigning European monarchs, Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany. Both kings were eager to prove themselves on the battlefield and strengthen their political positions back home. However, their crusading armies were large, unwieldy, and plagued by poor planning. The Germans under Conrad set out first, followed by the French, both heading for the Holy Land through Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. The journey across Anatolia proved to be a disaster for both armies. Conrad's forces were ambushed by Seljuk Turks near Dorylaeum in 1147, where they suffered devastating losses. Louis VII's army fared little better, constantly harassed by Turkish archers as they made their way through treacherous mountain passes. Despite the hardships, both kings eventually made it to the Holy Land, where they joined forces with the remaining Crusader states. The goal was to launch an attack on the Muslim city of Damascus, one of the most important and strategic cities in the region. In July 1148, the Crusaders launched their assault on Damascus. Initially, the siege went well, with Crusader forces advancing from the western side of the city, where they found ample water and supplies. But then something strange happened. For reasons that remain unclear, the Crusaders decided to shift their attack to the eastern side of Damascus, where the terrain was much less favorable. This move allowed the city's defenders, bolstered by reinforcements from Nur ad-Din, Zengi's son and the new ruler of Aleppo, to mount a successful counterattack. After only 4 days, the Crusaders were forced to abandon the siege and retreat. The failed siege of Damascus marked a major turning point in the Second Crusade. The kings and their armies returned to Europe in disgrace, their mission unfulfilled. One of the most interesting figures during the Second Crusade was Eleanor of Aquitaine, the wife of Louis VII, who accompanied her husband on the campaign. Eleanor's presence was unusual, and she brought a large retinue with her, contributing to the logistical challenges faced by the French army. Her relationship with Louis VII soured during the crusade, and upon their return, the marriage eventually ended in annulment. Eleanor would later go on to marry Henry II of England, becoming one of the most powerful women of the Middle Ages. Although the Second Crusade is best known for its failure in the Holy Land, it did have some success in other regions. Crusading efforts were also focused on Iberia, where Christian forces were fighting to reclaim territory from the Moors. In 1147, a combined force of Crusaders and Portuguese soldiers captured the city of Lisbon, securing an important victory in the ongoing Reconquista. Meanwhile, in northern Europe, a separate campaign known as the Wendish Crusade was launched to convert the pagan Slavs in the Baltic region. Though less successful, it marked the beginning of a long series of northern crusades aimed at expanding Christian influence. The failure of the Second Crusade had long-lasting consequences. It weakened Christian morale and emboldened Muslim leaders like Nur ad-Din, who would go on to consolidate power in Syria and prepare the way for his successor, Saladin. The Crusaders' failure at Damascus marked a shift in power in the region, as Muslim forces grew stronger and more unified, while the Crusader states became more isolated and vulnerable. The Second Crusade's defeat was a stark reminder that religious zeal and noble ambitions were no guarantee of success. The Second Crusade, while largely a failure, played an important role in shaping the later Crusades and the political landscape of the medieval world. It set the stage for future conflicts between Christian and Muslim powers that would last for centuries to come. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge. See you next time on In History.